Aloha everyone, welcome back to the Aquarium Zen YouTube channel. Today we're going to be doing a little update on my container ponds that you can see behind me. They're growing in nicely. They've been going for a little over a month now, and I just kind of wanted to do a deep dive on their status, show you what I've learned, what's working, what's not working. I'm also going to invite my friend Sara from Garden Ponds Nursery in Kilauea back, and she's going to tell us about how to repot water lilies. Repotting lilies is really one of the crucial steps, crucial factors in keeping your water lilies and water plants healthy. And I thought it'd be great to ask Sara to just give her expert advice on the step-by-step process of how to repot your water lilies and other water plants. So let's get into it. We're just going to walk through these container ponds that you see behind me and have some fun, talk about the beautiful ecosystems that I've created out here in this beautiful land in Hawaii. Let's go. It's another absolutely beautiful summer morning here on this land in Hawaii. I'm very blessed to live here. I feel fortunate every day to have had this experience. Taking time out of working for most of my life and just being able to focus in on my creativity again and working with this beautiful environment, the sunshine, warm temperatures, and everything it has to offer. So we're going to go from container pond to container pond. I'm just going to kind of give you an update, show you what's happening in these enchanting little ecosystems that I've created. So our first one is doing really well. They're all doing really well actually, but you can see we've got some medaka cruising around. This is the Kugyoko strain of medaka, and they have a beautiful kind of mottled iridescence. The feature plant, you can see, and they're very variable, like that one almost looks silver, the one next to it looks very orange. Really cool strain. This is one of my favorite strains that I'm raising. I have about 15 different strains of Japanese medaka, really high quality Japanese medaka strains that are growing up now that I hope to start raising commercially on this property. So if you remember my first video about container ponds, that there's a few simple elements that you have to pay attention to. One, you have to have the clarifying plants. In this case, the clarifying plant is a type of Vallisneria. It's kind of turning red in all this sunlight. I'm also using water lettuce as clarifying plants, and I'm using the beautiful mosaic plant, Ludwigia sedoides, as a clarifying plant. So those really act as like the engine of ecosystem health in these environments. They're fast growth, and the way they oxygenate the water with their transpiration really keeps these environments healthy. I don't really do water changes on these container ponds. They are periodically refreshed with rainwater, but you can see the water is just crystal clear. You can see right to the bottom. The fish are really happy. Everything's doing really well. And then the other feature beyond the clarifying plants that's really important is our feature plant. Just something beautiful, something really exotic, eye-catching, that really captures the center of attention, center of focus. This one is a tropical water lily called Madame Ganawalska, and one of the sweetest smelling water lilies out there. I wish we had smell-o-vision here on YouTube so you guys could smell it, because it's really a special scent. That's one of my favorite parts of growing water lilies is actually their scent. Madame Ganawalska is a viviparous lily, meaning, I don't know if you can see this little nub in the center there. That's actually the bud of a new lily that's going to form. So as the leaves start out really nice and fresh and mottled, looking like that, very crisp, saturation of red and contrast with the green. Then over time they kind of turn yellow, get kind of ratty looking, but they're still very useful because right here in that little nub, a whole new plant's going to grow. So later I'm going to cut this leaf off and bring it over to where I have a little nursery where I'm actively propagating the lilies as well. So that's kind of a fun thing, that some of the water lilies are actually live bearers, you could say, much like live bearing fish like guppies and platies. So this is a really fun container pond, one of my favorites, doing really well. Some of my favorite medaka are in here. They do breed. I do feed the fish on occasion. Now the reason for that is I'm trying to breed the medaka and I want to keep them in optimal health. They're basically surface eaters, so they're only going to eat the bugs and things that land on the surface of the water. And I've been finding to get them to breed, it's just not quite enough nutrition for them. So I do feed them a little medaka food. So I just have my container ponds kind of oriented in this U shape, almost so I can, a gallery so to speak, where I can just kind of walk through and check on them. It's really pleasing for me to be able to do that, look in each individual pond and see how it's doing. Here again we could see some little medaka. This is a Miyuki strain or platinum strain that I've created myself, and I've got a trio, male and two females in there. Again, it's similar to the last pond. We've got clarifying plants. This one has hornwort, that's doing really well. We've got the beautiful mosaic plant, another type of water lily, beautiful one there, and some water lettuce. So it's kind of a standard operating procedure, so to speak. You have your clarifying plants and your feature plant. I noticed a little snail just bobbed up on the surface there. So very simple. They run really well. You don't really need to do water changes. Kind of set them up properly, put them in the sunshine, and nature does the rest. It's really rewarding. One of the important things in maintaining these environments and keeping them healthy is to make sure they get the proper amount of sunlight. We want to see about 70% of the coverage of the container pond covered in leaves. So here we have approximately got that ratio here in this one, and it's doing really well. So the mosaic plant and the water lilies and the water lettuce are all kind of creating a canopy on the surface, a filter, so to speak, that's diffusing the intensity of the tropical sunlight that we have here. Even in the temperate regions in the summertime, the sunlight is very, very intense. And so to keep this whole thing from blowing up with algae, we really want to keep a canopy, so to speak, of about 70% coverage of leaves on the surface, just to maintain water clarity and keeping the whole ecosystem relatively algae free. And you can see we're achieving that in this container pond. Super healthy, super fun to watch these fish every morning do their little dance and mating ritual, and it's just really, really pleasing. This is a really cool little container pond. I've got a Mancala ubol water lily, a really beautiful, actually hardy water lily. This is one of the kinds that is a temperate water lily and sort of dies back in the winter and will regrow in the spring. But it has a really beautiful peach blossom. And again, I have my clarifying plants. This time I have a whole bunch of guppy grass, najas, that's doing really well. I also have an aquarium plant growing here that's doing really, really well. This is the blood red version of Rotala rotundifolia, and I have it rooted in the same pot with my water lily, and it's just taken over. And it looks beautiful. I love the pink that's growing, the pink color that's kind of developing. And you can see some immersed leaves happening. It'll probably flower at some point. So again, another really healthy container pond. We have our little medaka fish growing up, some really beautiful sparkly calico variety. This one's called gecko, and they're still babies, so I'm looking forward to seeing what they look like as adults. But a really special one. again, about 70% coverage on the surface is really important. A variety of clarifying plants and our feature plant, the water lily. And things just happen naturally. Things just work out kind of at their own pace, and it's really a truly ecosystem that functions like one superorganism, really. I do occasionally feed these guys. They're still growing, but there's lots of wild foods that pop up in these environments as well, so they're very healthy fish. Here we have one of the stars of the container pond show. We've got the Star of Siam tropical water lily. Look at the foliage on that plant. Isn't that magnificent? I mean, it's like tiger stripes. Such an exotic mottled variegation. It just really conjures up everything you think about when you think about the exoticness of tropical plants, tropical life. It's all captured in this beautiful water lily. I believe this variety was developed in Thailand. So you can see just a lovely purple flower, and just amazing. Again, I could smell it from here, the scent of it, even though that flower is a few days old, so it still smells wonderful. And again, just this beautiful, large mottled leaves covering the surface of our container pond. This container pond has a little population of guppies. It's a strain of Dumbo mosaic guppies that I've developed here on the land. They're really kind of fun, kind of psychedelic swirly patterns of purple and red sometimes. So just this pond's very simple. We just have our feature plant, the Star of Siam. I have some giant vallisneria. You can see the leaves are growing, almost like kelp leaves or something, all the way to the surface of this rather large pot. And then we have some guppy grass and little guppies coming from behind to examine things, think they're going to get fed or something. So that's been a really successful pond for me and one of my favorites. In general, it's recommended not to feed the fish in your container pond, and that just kind of keeps them hunting actively, feeding on the wild foods, grazing on the algae, that sort of thing. I do give them little treats. I just can't help myself. I'm a fish lover, and I love to feed my fish, so I do feed them a little bit. But it's really best for the whole ecosystem's health not to overfeed your fish so they don't overpopulate the environment, and that they do work for you and keep your whole container pond environment healthy, free of mosquito larvae, free of nuisance algae, that sort of thing. So it's tough. You have to restrain yourself, I find, as a fish keeper, fish lover, not to feed fish in your container pond, but that's one of the goals, just to keep the whole environment healthy. Moving on, we're at another container pond. This one I'm working with water lotus. Water lotus is a fascinating plant, very important in a lot of Asian cultures. It's symbolic of enlightenment, actually. The Sanskrit word for water lotus means perfection. And I just find it to be a really fascinating plant. It initially creates these surface leaves that act like little solar panels that energize the rooting portion of the plant down in the substrate, and then eventually it starts throwing these like umbrella leaves that kind of hover above the surface of the water, and from there it'll start to flower. So this one has just started throwing up those like more emergent style leaves, the umbrella shape, mostly just growing as the surface leaves, and then probably in a few weeks I could look forward to flowers. Lotus can be a little bit challenging. It's been a little bit challenging for me, mostly with just kind of figuring out the right ratio of nutrients in the substrate. If you fertilize your lotus too early, you can actually harm the plant. So that's a lesson I've been trying to learn. Some of my lotuses are doing really well, some not so well. So I'm a beginner to all this. You guys are following along my journey. That's why I invite people like Sara and Ken Bernard from Garden Ponds to kind of give us the skinny on how to really do these environments correctly. But I'm really happy with this one. Another beautiful one. It's got some medaka fish in there. This is a strain I created myself, a lame strain, and just a few fish in there. And yeah, it's just looking really good. When I look at a container pond like this one with the sacred lotus emerging out of it, I really feel like I'm transported back in time with, the first fish keepers. We think people started keeping fish purely for their ornamental value, purely for their enjoyment, purely for their beauty about 4,000 years ago. So we're involved in a very ancient part of human history, you guys. This is not a new thing in human culture. People have been keeping fish in containers like this for thousands of years. So this is really how they probably first did it, in a big pot, a big clay pot. Obviously they didn't have fancy aquariums 4,000 years ago. So those first fish keepers probably just they're fascinated by fish. They love fish like many humans do, like all of us tuned into this channel, for example. And they wanted to see them up close and personal, have a relationship with them. And so they started putting them in pots of water and developing an intimacy with the fish world, with the aquatic world. So here we have, again, the sacred lotus is throwing up these big, beautiful, emergent umbrella form leaves. This is the stage prior to when it'll start flowering. So that's exciting for me to know some beautiful flowers are going to erupt out of this at some point. And it's doing really well. I just love this plant. I can't say enough about it. You can grow in the summertime in temperate climates. There's actually two types of lotus in the world. There's an Asian variety and an American variety. I believe they've been hybridized to create many of the varieties that are on the market nowadays. But it's just an ancient plant, really fascinating. One of the fun things about lotus is it's water repellent, the leaves, so you throw some water, some rain that gets on the leaf surface, and it just kind of beads up and spills off. So they've just been perfected by nature to grow in these aquatic environments, and they look just beautiful. One of my absolute favorite things that I've ever worked with in an aquatic environment is the sacred lotus. Can't say enough about them. They're just magical, really truly are magical ancient plants that I feel blessed to be able to grow. All right, now we come to probably my favorite, at least favorite of this week of the container ponds, this beauty right here. One of the things I really like about container pond gardening is that, since you're really looking down on these environments from the top, you're aquascaping on the surface of the container. That's really where the action is. So you can create almost like a mosaic of leaf forms and shapes and colors. And that's really what I've done here very intentionally. It kind of looks like abstract art to me, where we have the mosaic plants and this beautiful water lily here is called arc-en-ciel. And arc-en-ciel is mostly grown just for its foliage. It has this beautiful pink variegated mottled foliage that looks just wonderful as you're looking down on the surface of the environment. I guess it doesn't flower that regularly, and the flowers are rather insignificant, but it's really grown for its beautiful pink variegated foliage. And then over next to it, I have a dwarf variety of the sacred lotus again, and it's really been flowering wonderfully this week, and that's kind of why I wanted to shoot this video, to capture it in its prime. But you could see the beautiful flowers. Here's one just starting to open up, one bud starting to open up. This one's a couple days older, but just a magnificent plant. You can see why ancient cultures really respected the lotus and valued it. The lotus is one of the most ancient plants on the planet. We know the rough timing of when the dinosaurs went extinct, the season they went extinct, because there's fossilized lotus pollen at that point in the archaeological record. So the dinosaurs must have gone extinct at some point when the lotuses were flowering between April and autumn, which is kind of a fun factoid for you. Really interesting plant. You can see the surface leaves here look a little damaged, and that's from the myna birds that come and use this particular pond as their bath. And that's been kind of annoying to observe. I love having the birds utilize these ponds for their, for drinking and bathing, but it kind of sucks when they damage the plants. So those are all little claw marks from the birds that you're seeing there. But yeah, we have a group of medaka. This is a lame strain that I created myself. Beautiful sparkly iridescence along their back. Kind of a darker bodied fish, almost like a black fish with beautiful sparkly lame scales. Lame is the variety that the Japanese have called that, have this kind of sparkly iridescence along their back. And that's one of my favorite things about raising medaka, is working on developing those really sparkly lame strains that are just so enchanting in these container ponds. But yeah, really beautiful. One of my favorites. Just so stoked to see the lotus thriving like it is this week, and just blooming and showing off to its best. And here we come to our final container pond of the collection. This one features a purple joy water lily. We also got some of the mosaic plant, Ludwigia pseudoides, growing on the surface. Just a magical aquatic plant to work with. I encourage you all to play with it, even in the summertime. In almost any environment you could grow that plant. Here is a strain of Dumbo mosaic guppy, really beautiful male. I'm pretty proud of that guy. Kind of psychedelic pattern to his tail there and back. A strain I'm working on, very colorful one that hope to produce on the land here. We also got a pair of medaka hanging out there. Kind of old. They're getting a little bit old. When my medaka only live about 2 years or so, and those guys are definitely getting to about that age. But yeah, I'm a little concerned about the health of the purple joy water lily. The leaves are looking kind of yellow. I feel like maybe it's time to repot that one, give it some boost of fertilizer. It's been blooming regularly here for the last few weeks, and I just kind of wonder if it's exhausted its supply of nutrients. You can see an old flower right there. But yeah, it's a wonderful plant, very exciting one. But I think it is time to repot that one, which is a great segue into our next section of this video. We're going to have Sara talk about one of her favorite water lilies, the Madame Ganawalska tropical water lily, and how she recommends repotting your water lilies when it's time to give them a boost of nutrients, a little more growth, a little more room for growth in the pot. And yeah, we'll just kind of hand this video off to Sara now.
So this here is a Madame Gonowalska tropical water lily, Nymphaea Madame Gonowalska, and we're gonna do a little repotting tutorial today on her. I'm gonna be looking for reasons why she might need to be repotted, and what I really tuned into was that her stem has aphids. So I don't know what's going on, and I'm gonna just investigate. And I just also want to clarify that repotting doesn't necessarily mean upsizing as it normally does for a lot of plants. Repotting just often means just giving it fresh dirt. Because it is in an enclosed environment, often the dirt can go anaerobic and it just needs to change the dirt. So if in nature, basically it would uproot itself and float downstream and then re-anchor itself in a more favorable dirt environment. So we're just going to try and mimic that as much as we possibly can, and just say, instead of having her get to the point where she rots in her crown or in her root system and has to detach that way, we're going to look for signs. So that's the first sign I'm looking at, is that aphids. Other than that, she's a very healthy water lily. A lot of blooms coming, nice big leaves. And so basically I'm just going to investigate. They do need to be repotted about every 6 to 9 months, and tuning into them and being able to sort of catch it before it goes downhill is a really it's a cool skill to be able to build, because you really tune into your plants, and you can keep them going strong without having them slow down. And here in Kauai in the subtropics, we can keep these tropical water lilies blooming all year. So we do whatever we can to make that happen, because it is such a joy to wake up to a water lily bloom every day. The first step to repotting a tropical water lily will be to tip it over on a surface that you don't mind getting wet and dirty, and then take the pot off. And you're going to look at the roots, and in this lily here there's a lot of white roots. Everything looks really healthy. I'm going to pick it up from the crown, and the roots are actually hanging onto the dirt, and that's a really good sign. So it doesn't seem like there's anything really wrong with the dirt. Another thing you can do is smell the dirt. If it smells funky or anaerobic, then you're definitely going to want to change it out. Over here you can see the dirt is kind of sort of wanting to fall away. So, you know, you can just take off some of the dirt that might be getting a little bit funky. But overall, this is a very healthy water lily, and what we're doing is we're just going to give her a little refresh. And these white roots are anchor roots, so you don't have to worry about cutting them. In fact, I might be tempted to just get a sickle and cut back some of these roots right here. If I can find a sickle, yeah. Sickle is a very helpful water gardening tool. And you can basically just cut off about 1/3 of the root mass, and that will give it a little more of a lifespan in this pot. So you can see here there's some of the fertilizer. I don't know if you can see that, but there's still some of the fertilizer that's been undigested there from about a month ago. So it seems like maybe it was a little bit root bound, and that might have been making the plant feel a little bit weak and prone to aphid infestation. So I'm just going to cut back some of the root mass and refresh the dirt. So I just have dirt dug right out of the ground, just this red-brown dirt that you can dig from the ground here on Kauai. And you do about 1/3 of a layer in the bottom of the pot with that. And then this is our lily tab fertilizer. It tends to turn to dust here in the tropics, but you can still use it. You just use about 1 tablet worth. So if you picture this powder compressed into a tablet, about 1 tablet worth of the fertilizer in the middle of the pot. And then you take the strata, which is a high-fired clay, and you just sprinkle a layer of that over the fertilizer. and then another layer of dirt. So that's dirt, fertilizer, strata, more dirt, then you bring your plant back. And I'm just going to squish the roots down a little bit, center the crown. Tropical water lilies grow in the center with their roots growing straight down, whereas hardy water lilies grow across the pot, a rhizome across the pot. Once they hit the edge of the pot, they'll jump the pot and keep growing out of the pot. Whereas tropical water lilies, they just grow straight up and down. So that's important to note when repotting, because with the hardy, you're going to want to replant it on the edge of the pot so it has room to grow across. The tropical water lily, you plant it directly in the middle. And then you just sprinkle some dirt to cover the roots. And you want to be really careful not to get dirt in the crown of the plant, which is basically where the plant like grows up out of the dirt. So you don't want dirt falling in there. So that's her with her dirt, and I'm gonna get a rock and just add a rock on top to sort of anchor it. And then I'm going to top dress with strata here. And this just weighs the dirt down so it doesn't flush into your ecosystem. And then I'm going to prune the leaves that are wilted, yellowing, torn. That bloom is probably going to open again tomorrow. I squeezed it and water didn't come out. So if you squeeze it and water comes out, you know it's spent, but we're getting closer to the end of the day where they start to close up. So that one's probably just closed up. This one will bloom again tomorrow. Looks like maybe a third day bloom. It might have one more day of blooming. There she is, Madame. Oh, that's the wrong tag. Madame Gonowalska. And you put a tag in it so you know what it is later. But yeah, I say that Madame Gonowalska is the most fragrant water lily, actually. Okay, so that was the repotting of a Madame Gonowalska, and she is probably the most fragrant tropical water lily that I have come into contact with. Sort of smells, I don't know how to describe it. It's sort of indescribable. It's very almost citrusy, but a little lighter. It's a very pleasant smell, and Madame Gonowalska was named after a woman named Madame Gonowalska, and she was a Polish opera singer that devoted her life to acquiring strange and wonderful plants. And she fell in love with water lilies and water gardening and turned her property into basically a botanical garden, and when she passed away she donated it to become a public botanical garden, and you can visit it in Santa Barbara. It's called Lotus Land, and this water lily, Madame Gonowalska, is named after her. She was a very eccentric character. You should probably look into her specifically too. Okay, so we're going to put the Madame back in her tank.
I hope you all enjoyed that little update of my watery worlds here in Hawaii and gained some knowledge on how to maintain your water lilies from Sara. Thank you, Sara, for joining me again. So it's been a pleasure to connect with you guys today. I hope you got some inspiration. Keep tuning in, keep subscribing to the Aquarium Zen YouTube channel for aquascaping inspiration, both indoors and outdoors, here on YouTube. Aloha everyone, and I'll see you next time. This has been Steve Waldron.